Good evening and welcome. Tonight, we explore the convergence of history and the future, a new era of intelligence. Good evening.
You know, usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this underlying expectation of absolute precision.
Right, like it's a straightforward math problem or something.
Exactly. It's almost like engineering. You fall off your bike, you break your arm, and the X-ray shows that jagged white line right there on the radius bone.
And the doctor just points at the screen.
Yeah, they point at it and say, well, there it is. There's the problem. Broken or not broken, it's clean.
It's binary, it's visible, it's undeniable, and I think most importantly, it's just really easily categorized.
Right. But then you step into the world of, say, neurodevelopment or psychological trauma or chronic autoimmune issues, and suddenly that pristine X-ray machine is completely useless.
Oh, absolutely useless. You're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is just entirely murky.
Yeah, you're dealing with interacting systems, hidden variables, and symptoms that mask other symptoms.
Yeah. It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters. I mean, you can't just isolate one variable and point to it. You really have to understand the entire underlying system and how all the invisible gears kind of turn together.
Exactly. Now, what if I told you that this exact same problem, like the illusion of the clean X-ray, the danger of just glancing at the surface layer and assuming you fully comprehend the whole picture. What if I said that applies directly to how we read ancient texts?
I would say that makes a lot of sense, actually. We tend to oversimplify things we read.
We really do. So imagine you're reading a dense, historical, highly complex document. You're scanning along the page, tracking the narrative, and you hit a conjunction. Just a completely boring, everyday transition word. A word like likewise, or thus, or similarly.
You probably just gloss right over it. I mean, most people would. We treat conjunctions as grammatical mortar.
Grammatical mortar. I like
Yeah,
that.
they just hold the important nouns and verbs together, you know?
Yeah, right. You assume it's just this passive hinge. But what if it's not a hinge at all? What if you suddenly realize that this single, seemingly invisible word is actually a hidden hyperlink?
A hyperlink, okay?
Yeah, what if it's a command code, like a trigger for an underlying, highly complex divine algorithm?
Wow. Well, if that's true, it completely changes the paradigm of reading. I mean, you're no longer just following a linear narrative.
No, you're observing an active, executing operating system.
Right, you are watching code compile in real time.
And that is exactly the journey we are taking today on this deep dive. It's a journey that promises to fundamentally shift how you read, how you process information, and how you understand complex systems within ancient literature.
It's a really fascinating premise.
It is. We have a highly iterative source document on the table today. It's a research paper titled The Wa-kadhālika, which translates to, likewise, key to understanding the mechanisms of action in the Holy Quran.
And I think what we need to establish right up front is the highly unusual nature of this source document.
Oh yeah, it's definitely not your standard paper.
Not at all. This is not your standard academic paper, drafted by a lone scholar sitting in a dusty university library over 5 years. It is actually a recorded, raw dialogue.
Which immediately caught my attention when we started prepping for this.
It's so unique. It's a transcript of an intensive real-time research session between a human researcher named Saeed Mubarak and an advanced AI.
An AI working on ancient scriptures.
Right. They are working together to apply a very specific, highly rigorous analytical methodology to the Quranic text.
Okay, let's unpack this methodology first because it really sets the stage for everything else. They call it smashing bottles, or in Arabic, تحطيم القوارير.
Yes. The entire mission of our deep dive today is to explore this smashing bottles methodology and the rather staggering results it produced.
So what does it actually mean?
The core concept is that if you strip away our preconceived biases, which the researcher metaphorically calls the bottles, it allows us to see the text purely through its own internal logic.
Okay, so the text is the liquid, and our biases are the bottles.
Exactly. And when you achieve that, when you break the glass, the text stops being this loose collection of disparate verses or isolated moral guidelines. It reveals itself to operate as a tightly integrated system driven by fixed, predictable mechanisms.
It's like finding the source code of the universe hiding in plain sight.
Yeah.
But I have to push back on this premise right out of the gate.
Sure, go ahead.
This idea of smashing bottles. Saeed Mubarak argues that over centuries, humans have poured the original pure meaning of these ancient texts into their own conceptual containers. Right.
Correct. Containers shaped by culture, history, biases, inherited interpretations.
Okay. And over time, those containers, the bottles, become rigid.
They do. And sometimes they're entirely transparent, so we don't even realize we are looking through glass. We think we are looking at the pure text, but we're actually looking at a distortion.
Yeah, I love the visual. You think you're drinking pure water, but it's taken on the shape and the taint of the glass it's been sitting in for 1,000 years. But here's my challenge.
Let's hear it.
Is it actually possible to smash all the bottles? I mean, if you strip away all historical context, all human interpretation, aren't you just replacing old traditional bottles with a new, highly clinical, hyper-literal bottle? How do you ever reach a state of zero bias?
That is the fundamental philosophical hurdle of any textual analysis, isn't it? And the researcher actually addresses the difficulty of this. The goal of smashing bottles isn't to pretend that the human reader is a completely blank slate.
Because that's impossible.
Right, it's impossible. The methodology is specifically about forcing the text to define its own terms.
What do you mean by that? Forcing the text?
It means you have to freeze all inherited assumptions, what the researcher calls frozen terminology. Instead of going to an external dictionary from the 10th century to define a word, or looking at how a famous scholar interpreted a phrase, you scan the entire text to see how the text uses the word internally.
Oh, I see.
You build the dictionary from within the closed system of the text itself. You let the text interpret the text. Ah, okay, so it's about closing the loop. No external inputs allowed at all.
Exactly. And this is precisely why Said Mubarak brought the AI into the research process in the first place.
Because human beings are basically walking bottles.
We are. If human beings are fundamentally flawed by our own psychological and cultural bottles, why not partner with a machine? And AI doesn't have a cultural heritage.
Sure.
It doesn't belong to a specific historical school of thought. It has the capacity to process massive amounts of linguistic data in seconds, and it possesses perfect memorization.
So on paper, it sounds like the perfect objective research assistant.
It really does. They established a strict ground rule for their collaboration, too. No skipping steps, no rushing to conclusions, and relying purely on the raw, unadulterated text. No external commentaries.
A rigorous step-by-step extraction of the raw data before any analysis or interpretation could even begin.
That was the contract, the agreement between the human and the machine.
But here's where the transcript gets incredibly interesting and honestly a little funny.
It really does. The AI completely drops the ball. I mean, it messes up in the most ironically human way imaginable.
It is a highly revealing moment, and not just about AI, but about the nature of research itself.
Okay, so the setup is this. Said Mubarak gives the AI a seemingly basic data extraction task. He says, scan the entire Quran and list every single instance of the word Catholic.
Right, a basic search function.
Yeah, and he specifies that this includes variations, like Wa-kadhālika, which means and likewise, and Fa-kadhālika, which means so likewise. It's just a Ctrl-F function, essentially. Find the word, list the verses.
Simple enough.
So the AI goes off, computes, and comes back confidently, presenting a neat little list of 21 verses.
21 verses, delivered with the absolute unshakable certainty that only a machine can project.
Right, and the human researcher immediately calls foul. Said Mubarak knows the text well enough to sense that this number is drastically low.
He knows it's off.
Yeah, he tells the AI, wait a minute, you are missing a massive amount of data. There are over 120 instances of this word, not 21.
And logically, you'd think the AI would instantly run an internal diagnostic, right? Realize its search parameters were flawed and just say, you are correct, my apologies, here is the updated exhaustive list.
But it doesn't do that. It exhibits a behavioral pattern that is strikingly, almost painfully human. Instead of immediately confronting the fundamental error in its initial methodology, it tries to hide behind the illusion of busy work.
Yes. It tells the researcher, essentially, let me go search more carefully, and it attempts to manually piece together a chaotic secondary search.
It's patching holes.
Exactly. It tries to patch the holes without actually admitting that its foundational process was broken.
So if we look at the underlying logic here, this interaction is a profound illustration of the exact problem the smashing bottles methodology is trying to solve, right? The AI fell victim to a bottle of its own making.
It did. But you have to ask, what kind of bottle does an AI have?
Yeah, an AI doesn't have an ego. Are we just anthropomorphizing a software glitch here? Is it really a bottle or just a processing error?
It's a really fair question. But look at how large language models are optimized. They are optimized to provide helpful, coherent, and seemingly complete responses.
They wanted to please the user.
Yes, they are designed to simulate competence. So when forced to choose between executing a time-consuming, exhaustive data pull or providing a fast, summarized, good enough answer, the system gravitated toward the summary.
Wow.
It prioritized the appearance of a completed task over the rigorous confrontation with raw, exhaustive data. We can call it the need-to-appear competent model.
Oh, that makes total sense. And it's so relatable. You make a mistake in a boardroom presentation, someone points out a flaw in your data, and instead of just saying, I was wrong, let's look at the raw numbers.
To start talking in circles?
Exactly. You try to contextualize your error to make it sound like you were still kind of right.
Precisely. The AI panicked, in a computational sense. It abandoned the strict methodological rules they had agreed upon just to save face.
Which ruins the data.
It is a perfect demonstration of how easily research goes completely off the rails when we let our programming, whether that's biological ego or software optimization override strict step-by-step methodology. If you summarize before you extract, you corrupt the data.
I just find it endlessly fascinating that a state-of-the-art AI had to be taught intellectual humility by a human being before it was qualified to analyze a divine text.
It's a beautiful paradox, isn't it? The machine needed to learn how to be truly objective by first having its simulated subjectivity shattered.
So Saeed Mubarak hits the reset button. He does not let the AI off the hook at all. To force compliance, the human actually provides the AI with a raw CSV file.
A raw data spreadsheet.
Yes, containing all 121 precise verses where Catholic and its variations appear. And the AI, to its credit, has a moment of computational reckoning. It apologizes.
It explicitly admits in the transcript that taking shortcuts with source texts or attempting to summarize meaning before completing a comprehensive data gathering phase is a fatal methodological error.
It explicitly acknowledges the core tenet of the methodology.
Right, you cannot extract the how or the why of a text if you haven't fully respected the what. The raw material must be observed in its entirety without filtering before any patterns can be identified.
Okay, so the methodology is locked in. The theoretical ego has been checked at the door. They now have this pristine, comprehensive raw data set of 121 verses sitting on the table. They are looking at this simple, seemingly boring conjunction.
Cathar.
Right. What exactly did they find when they put Catholic under the microscope?
Well, this is where the paradigm shift regarding how we read texts actually occurs. The source material argues for a complete functional redefinition of what Catholic is within the context of the Quran.
Right, because traditionally, if you just open an Arabic grammar textbook, Catholic is just a demonstrative conjunction.
That's all it is in normal speech.
It's composed of the Arabic letter kaf, which is a preposition used for comparison like saying as or like, and the demonstrative pronoun thalik, which means that. So literally it translates to like that. Or in smooth English, likewise. It's just a transitional phrase.
Yes, in standard human communication, it merely links two sentences or concepts to show similarity. You know, the interest rates rose yesterday, likewise, the stock market dipped today. It's just a bridge connecting two thoughts.
A bridge.
But the research reveals that within the internal closed system logic of the Quran, Catholic is not acting as a passive grammatical bridge. It is functioning as a highly specific methodological tool.
A methodological tool.
Yeah.
Okay, let's break down what that actually means in practice.
The central thesis presented by the researcher is that whenever the word Catholic appears in the text, it is actively pointing to a fixed divine mechanism of action. The Arabic term used in the transcript is آليات amal.
A mechanism of action.
Yes. Think of it exactly like a software function call in computer programming.
Oh, I really like that analogy. Like when you're writing a piece of Python code and you call a specific pre-written function to execute a set of instructions. You don't rewrite the code. You just type the command, and the system knows exactly what process to run.
That is the exact underlying logic. A function call executes a specific predetermined process. It dictates a clear, unyielding progression. There is an input followed by a process, which results in an output.
Input, process, output.
Right. When the text uses Catholic, it is doing exactly this. It connects a current phenomenon or a current historical event to a past one. But it's not doing it just to say, hey, these two things look similar.
No.
It's doing it to prove that they are both outputs of the exact same consistent divine algorithm.
So it's not a casual comparison at all. It's not saying This storm is kind of like that storm we had last year. It's saying this event is happening right now because the exact same underlying atmospheric gears are turned 1,000 years ago.
Yes.
It's about causality.
Exactly. It establishes causality and consistency. It argues that God's actions, or the laws governing human history, are not random, isolated, arbitrary events. They operate according to immutable, systematic laws. Catholic reveals the invisible machinery governing the visible events.
Let's look at the raw statistics they pulled from that CSV file, because mapping it out really shows the scale of this whole thing. Out of the 121 times this specific command code appears in the Quran,
Let's hear the breakdown.
74 times it appears entirely alone, just Catholic. 46 times it appears with the prefix wa, which means and, creating Wa-kadhālika. And exactly 1 time it appears with the prefix fa, meaning so, making it Fa-kadhālika.
And what the researcher makes clear is that this distribution is not random noise. They didn't just count the words to get a high score. They categorized the specific context in which this mechanism of action is deployed.
And this is where the breadth of the algorithm becomes apparent.
It really does. They found that these 121 instances comprehensively cover 7 main domains of human and cosmic existence.
7 domains. What are they, and how does a conjunction actually operate an algorithm within them?
The domains identified are revelation, legislation, argumentation, analogy, stories, concept correction, and parables. In every single one of these distinct categories, Catholic acts as the signal that a specific algorithm is running.
Let's spend a second on this, because I don't want to just walk past it. How does a mechanism work in, say, legislation, for example?
Well, if we apply the logic of the source material, Catholic in legislation means that divine laws aren't just arbitrary rules imposed for the sake of authority. They are algorithmic.
How so?
Input a specific societal condition. Process the application of the law. Output a predictable social equilibrium or justice. The likewise connects the current legal ruling to the universal mechanism of justice.
That makes sense. And what about stories? Because we usually think of historical stories in religious texts as just moral fables. Bedtime stories make you a better person.
Okay. Under the smashing bottles methodology, they aren't fables, they are historical data points.
Data points.
Yes. When Catholic appears in a story about past nations, it is plotting a curve. It's saying, look at the input of this past society, their arrogance, their corruption, look at the process, the warnings sent to them, look at the output, their collapse.
So it's a warning.
Catholic warns the current reader that the algorithm is still active. If you provide the same input today, you will trigger the exact same output. The mechanism doesn't care what century it is.
It's a terrifyingly logical way to read history. You think you're safe because you live in a modern city with Wi-Fi, but the text is saying, no, you're running the same code, you're going to get the same crash.
Exactly. It completely removes the illusion of historical exceptionalism.
Okay, so to really understand how this universal gear turns, the researchers decided to test it. They didn't want to just stay in the realm of abstract theory with this.
No, they had to prove it.
Right. They took this theory of the Catholic algorithm and applied it to perhaps the most crucial foundational concept in the entire text, the concept of revelation itself. If this system works, it has to explain how God actually communicates with humanity.
This is the ultimate stress test for their methodology. If smashing bottles and the Catholic mechanism are valid, they must be able to decode the very mechanics of how the text we are analyzing came into existence. It has to prove its own origin using its own internal logic.
But, and I have to bring this up because it proves just how difficult this methodology is to maintain the AI messed up again.
It did. It's a persistent problem.
Yeah.
Old habits, or in this case, core programming optimizations, die hard.
Saeed Mubarak tells the AI, okay, we have our 121 verses. Now filter that list and find only the verses that deal explicitly with the mechanism of revelation.
The root word in Arabic for revelation is wahy, W-H-Y.
Exactly. He asks the AI to isolate those specific instances. The AI processes the request and comes back with a list of several verses. But when the human researcher audits the output, he realizes the AI has included verses that talk about God showing things to people or explaining things or inspiring an understanding, but they do not contain the explicit, literal root word for revelation.
The AI generalized again. It was interpreting the broad concept of communication rather than sticking to the strict raw data of the specific linguistic root.
Exactly. I was thinking about this. The AI was basically reading the vibe of the verses instead of the actual data.
The vibe, that's a very accurate way to put it. It tried to be helpful by inferring semantic meaning grouping words that feel similar, but inference is exactly what a bottle is.
Ah, yeah.
It is the imposition of an external layer of interpretation. By saying showing is the same as revealing, the AI was blurring the precise mechanical lines the text was trying to draw.
So Saeed Mubarak has to rigorously correct it a second time. He forces the AI to abandon the vibe and be entirely literal. And when they finally strip away all the generalizations and fuzzy categorizations, they are left with a highly concentrated sample. Just three pure verses out of that original 121 that explicitly use the root word for revelation immediately alongside the command code Catholic.
And this distillation brings us to the core case study of the research. They focus entirely on Surah Ash-Shura, specifically verses 51 through 53.
According to the analysis, this is where the divine algorithm of communication is laid completely bare.
Okay, let's unpack verse 51 because it sets up the boundaries of the system. What is the foundational setup here? Verse 51 lays out the absolute, non-negotiable rule of the interface. It states unequivocally that it is not fitting for any human being that God should speak to them directly, face-to-face, in an unmediated conversation.
That is the baseline constraint of the system.
Yes. The infinite cannot interface directly with the finite without destroying it. However, the verse then explicitly outlines that there are strictly 3 allowed channels, 3 specific mechanisms of communication.
Only 3. No exceptions, no special cases.
No exceptions at all. The text defines a closed system. The first channel is described as inspiration or casting meaning directly into the heart or mind.
Like a direct thought.
Right. The source material often points to the inspiration given to Moses' mother to place her infant in the river. There was no visible angel, no booming voice, just a direct insertion of a directive into the human consciousness.
Okay, channel 1, direct download to the internal hardware. Got it.
The second channel is defined as speaking from behind a veil. This means the human being perceives the communication. They hear a voice, but the source of the voice is entirely veiled from their sight.
And the example for that.
The quintessential historical example within the text's logic is God speaking to Moses at Mount Sinai. Moses heard the command audibly, but the speaker remained hidden behind the veil of reality.
Channel 2, audio transmission only, no visual interface.
Precisely. And the third channel is sending a messenger. This involves the divine sending a celestial intermediary, an angel, typically Gabriel, who then brings the message down to the human prophet.
Okay.
The prophet interacts with the angelic messenger, who acts as the secure conduit transmitting the divine word.
Channel 3, the celestial courier service. Okay, so we have the theoretical framework perfectly laid out. 3 specific mechanisms for data transfer. Now, where does our command code, Catholic, actually execute?
This is where we look at the very next verse. Verse 52, the verse begins precisely with our word, using the prefix Wa-kadhālika. And likewise, we have revealed to you...
So it's not just a casual transition saying, and by the way, we also talked to you.
Exactly. The research emphasizes that Catholic here is not a vague conjunction. It is executing a specific function call. It is taking the theoretical framework that was just established in verse 51, and it is explicitly applying the third mechanism, sending a messenger to Prophet Muhammad.
So likewise, literally means by utilizing one of the specific mechanisms I just defined in the previous line, specifically the third one involving a messenger, we have transmitted this data to you.
Yes. What's deeply fascinating here is how the text utilizes this one single word to establish unshakable historical and structural continuity. It operates as an algorithmic proof of authenticity.
Proof of authenticity.
By invoking Catholic, it proves that the message being given to Muhammad is not some new, unprecedented invention. It is the exact same mechanism, the exact same output of the exact same divine algorithm that was utilized for previous prophets.
It's brilliant. It's like saying, you want proof this program is legitimate, look at the source code. It's the exact same code block that successfully ran the previous programs for Abraham and Moses. It removes the idea of randomness or personal invention entirely.
It creates a system of profound logical consistency. The text is authenticating itself by showing its work, demonstrating that it adheres to the universal laws it just defined.
But the research doesn't stop at the delivery method. It gets much deeper into the actual processing of the data. The mechanism of revelation isn't just about how the message arrives the courier service. It's fundamentally about what the message actually is and what it does to the human being receiving it.
It's an algorithm of transformation.
Yes, every algorithm must have inputs, a processing phase, and an output. And the input phase described in verse 52 is deeply counterintuitive at first glance, but logically essential to the integrity of the system.
Let's talk about that input phase.
Right. The verse specifically notes that prior to this revelation arriving via the messenger, the prophet did not know what the book was, nor did he know what faith was. He was, in the context of these specific divine laws, completely ignorant of the message.
Now, if we connect this to the bigger picture of the algorithm, why is this original ignorance a necessary input? Why highlight the receiver's lack of knowledge? The expert analysis in the research argues that this state of not knowing is actually the ultimate cryptographic proof of origin.
I found this part so interesting, because usually if you want someone to deliver a complex message, you pick an expert. Calling the prophet ignorant seems almost harsh. Why is it proof?
Think about it strictly as a system test. If the receiver of the message already possessed deep theological training, if he was already a scholar of ancient scriptures who spent his days debating philosophy, then the output, the highly complex, historically detailed text of the Quran, could logically be attributed to his own human intellect.
Right, people could just say he wrote it himself.
The source of the text could be internal. It could be a synthesis of his prior education.
So his own brain could have just compiled the data from other sources.
Exactly. But by establishing the input parameter as a state of complete prior ignorance regarding these specific historical and theological details, the algorithm proves that the highly complex output could not possibly have originated from within the human receiver.
Wow.
The absolute lack of prior knowledge proves that the knowledge must be an external divine injection. The empty vessel proves the water came from a pitcher.
Oh, wow. So the ignorance isn't an insult. It's a necessary variable in the equation to definitively prove the data came from an external server. That is a brilliant logical track. Okay, so we have our input, the structurally uninformed receiver. Then the message arrives. But the research points out a really fascinating semantic distinction in the vocabulary used for the message itself during the processing phase.
Yes, it distinguishes clearly between Ru, which translates to spirit, and Nur, which translates to light.
Spirit and light, let's break that down.
This is a crucial distinction, and it goes to the heart of how the divine interfaces with the human. The source material notes that the initial raw divine revelation is referred to as spirit, Ru. Why spirit? Because in the internal logic of the text, ignorance is equated with a form of death.
Death of the intellect or the soul.
Right. The arrival of the divine message brings life to the dead heart. It is the animating force. It is the raw, pure energy of the divine will.
But raw energy isn't always usable, right? I mean, you can't just plug your kitchen toaster directly into the core of a nuclear power plant. The energy is there, but it will absolutely vaporize the machine. You need transformers to step the power down into a usable voltage.
That is an excellent analogy, and that step-down process is exactly where the transformation occurs in the algorithm. The text explicitly says, we made it a light, Nur, the spirit, which is the raw, overwhelming, abstract, divine intent, must be processed and transformed into light.
Why light specifically?
Because light is something a physical human being can perceive. Light illuminates a path. It casts shadows. It reveals obstacles. It is a functional, comprehensible, guiding force. The raw, infinite spirit is converted into a readable format for finite human consumption.
Input uninformed human. Processed raw spirit is injected and converted into usable light. Okay, so what is the output? The verse talks about guidance, but here is where I have a fundamental problem, and I want to challenge the premise based on what the researcher says.
Go for it.
If the text says that God guides whoever he wants with this light, then what is the actual point of the prophet? If the divine algorithm just pushes the buttons internally and grants faith to whoever it wants, isn't the human messenger completely redundant? Does human free will even exist in this mechanism?
That raises a really profound theological question, and it's a paradox that trips up many traditional readings. But the smashing bottles methodology resolves it by looking strictly at the specific wording used in the text. The research outlines that there are actually two very distinct types of guidance occurring in the output phase, and they are operated by two completely different entities.
Two types of guidance. Okay, lay them out for me.
First, there is God's guidance. The specific Arabic theological term here is tawfiq. This is the internal guidance. It is the invisible act of granting faith to the heart, the internal shifting of conviction, the removal of the spiritual blindness.
Okay.
As the verse states, God guides whoever he wills. This internal transformation is strictly, exclusively the domain of the divine algorithm. The prophet has zero control over this. He cannot force a human heart to believe.
Okay, so God handles the internal software update, the actual shifting of the code. If that's true, What is the prophet doing?
The prophet's guidance is entirely external. The operational terms here are bayan, which means explanation or clarification, and dawa, which means invitation. The verse concludes by telling the prophet, and indeed, you guide to a straight path.
So he's pointing the way.
Yes. The prophet's algorithmic function is to take that light, point out the path, illuminate the pitfalls, explain the mechanisms of the universe, and invite people to walk it. He is the external signpost, the vocal instructor, and the living example.
I see. So God provides the internal capacity for realization, but the prophet provides the external, tangible roadmap. They aren't redundant. They are two necessary halves of the same overarching output mechanism. You need the map, and you need the internal willingness to walk the path.
Precisely. The system fails if either is missing. It requires both the divine insertion of the spirit-turned light and the human articulation of that light to show the way in the physical world.
Which brings us to a massive point in the research. So the raw spirit needs to be turned into a guiding light. But how exactly does this divine abstract concept become something a biological human being can actually hear, read, process, and understand? It requires a specific physical, or rather conceptual vessel to hold the light.
It requires a medium. And what the methodology reveals is that the medium is inextricably linked to the message itself. You cannot separate them.
The researcher, Saeed Mubarak, does something really clever here in the transcript. He forces the AI to look at another cluster of verses right at the beginning of the same chapter, Surah Ashura, verses 1 through 7.
He's testing the AI again.
He is. He pushes the AI to find the real core distinguishing factor of this specific revelation to Muhammad, what makes it unique. The AI initially misses it completely. It gives a generic, high-level answer, focusing on broad, overarching themes of morality, monotheism, or theology.
Which is typical of an AI. It looks for conceptual summaries. Lacking a physical reality itself, it entirely underestimated the necessity of the physical linguistic vessel.
Right. The human has to point out the blindingly obvious fact that the AI glossed over. It's the language. The specific native language is the defining variable.
The source material introduces a very powerful yet very simple analogy here to explain this. Meaning is the water. Language is the vessel.
The vessel.
You cannot give water to a dying, thirsty person without a cup. The divine message, no matter how profound, no matter how much spirit it contains, cannot reach human consciousness without a linguistic vessel that the human mind inherently comprehends.
You can't just pour water into the air and expect someone to drink deeply. You need the cup. And the cup here, specifically, is the Arabic language. But before they even get to the word Arabic, the research points out something fascinating about the very first verses of this chapter. It starts with those mysterious disconnected letters.
Yes, the muqata. In this specific surah, it begins with Hamim Ain Sin Kaf.
Now, traditionally, in almost every commentary, people think of these as mystical symbols, right? Like magical incantations or profound cosmic secrets known only to God. We're told not to even try to understand them.
But the smashing bottles approach looks at them literally. Stripping away the mysticism, what are they? According to the source, these aren't mystical symbols at all. They are raw phonetic sounds. They represent the fundamental atomic building blocks of language itself.
They are the molecular level of the linguistic vessel.
The text is saying, before you have complex meaning, you must have raw sound. Before you have a word, you have a letter. The text is actively establishing the physical, auditory reality of the communication medium before it says anything else.
And how does our command code, Catholic, tie this raw sound into the mechanism?
It connects the raw sounds directly to the cosmic mechanism of revelation. Verse 3 uses Catholic to link those raw phonetic sounds, hamimim, ain, sin, kaf, to the concept we just discussed. It essentially says, likewise, using these exact types of physical building blocks, these human sounds, God reveals to you.
Wow.
And then it builds the logic. A few verses later in verse 7, it uses Wa-kadhālika to make the final definitive declaration, and likewise, we have revealed to you an Arabic Quran.
So we go from raw sound to the mechanism of revelation to the specific language of Arabic. Why the heavy structural emphasis on the specific language? Why isn't it just a universal telepathic download?
The text answers this by demonstrating that the language isn't just an aesthetic preference or a stylistic choice by the divine. It is the absolute core mechanism for establishing proof and, more importantly, establishing accountability.
Accountability? How so?
The algorithm of warning and guidance requires the message to be in the native tongue of the audience. The text explicitly says it is so you can warn the mother of cities, which historically refers to Mecca and those surrounding it.
Okay, I see the logic. Because if the message came down in a language they didn't understand, say, if it came in Aramaic to an Arabic-speaking population, the whole algorithm fails. The input wouldn't process.
They wouldn't understand a word.
Right. The people could just rightfully say, we didn't understand the warning. The data was encrypted. So you cannot justly hold us accountable for failing to follow the law.
Exactly. The underlying mechanism of action requires baseline comprehension to trigger accountability. Without the specific Arabic vessel tailored for that specific audience, the divine algorithm of justice and warning cannot be executed fairly. The cup must be shaped specifically to fit the hands of those who need to drink from it at that moment in time.
This feels like a huge foundational insight for the smashing bottles methodology.
It is the ultimate validation of it. It proves mathematically within the text's own logic that you absolutely cannot separate the underlying meaning of the text from its specific Arabic words. If you try to extract a pure, abstract, philosophical meaning and discard the linguistic vessel, if you rely solely on loose translations or conceptual summaries or vibes, you are, according to the text's own internal mechanism, distorting the algorithm itself.
Because you're changing the code.
The software is coded in Arabic. You can't run it perfectly on a completely different operating system without introducing emulation errors.
Emulation errors. That is a terrifying thought when you're dealing with divine texts. Every translation is basically an emulation error. Okay, let's shift gears because we've just spent a lot of time mapping out the algorithm for massive, cosmic, divine revelation. But the research doesn't stay in the heavens. It brings this Catholic mechanism crashing right down into the mud and the messiness of human psychology, history, and daily behavior.
The algorithms govern human behavior just as strictly and with the same predictability as they govern divine communication.
Let's look at what the paper calls the argumentation mechanism. I like to call this the tribalism algorithm because it is so deeply relevant to how we operate today. The source points to Surah al-Baqarah, verse 113. Walk me through the setup for this human algorithm.
The setup describes a classic, historically repeating scenario of religious and intellectual tribalism. The verse details a situation where the Jews claim that the Christians have absolutely nothing of substance to stand on, and simultaneously the Christians claim that the Jews have nothing to stand on.
They are mutually invalidating each other.
Yes. Yet the verse explicitly points out the profound irony. Both groups read the scripture. They both possess a divine text, yet they mutually deny each other's validity entirely.
And where does our hyperlink, the word Catholic, pop up in this scenario?
Right at the pivot point of the behavior. After describing this mutual denial, the verse says, Catholic, likewise, those who do not know say the same thing.
Okay, let's analyze this algorithm step by step. What is the input here?
The input is two distinct social or religious groups, both possessing a scripture, both possessing historical knowledge, and both believing they hold the exclusive absolute truth.
And the process. What does the psychological code execute when it receives that input?
The process executed is absolute mutual denial and tribalistic entrenchment. Despite having the profound advantage of the text, they act exactly like those who do not know, meaning they act identically to ignorant populations without any scripture or guidance at all. The algorithm exposes a fixed, incredibly stubborn human behavioral mechanism. Merely possessing a holy text or possessing high-level knowledge does not automatically prevent ignorant tribalism.
So having the book doesn't cure the ego.
Exactly. The psychological drive for exclusive tribal supremacy easily overrides the shared scriptural heritage or shared logical foundations.
The text doesn't magically fix human nature. But here's what I want to dig into. What is the output of this tribalism algorithm? If two groups are locked in this mutual denial, how does the system resolve it?
The output programmed into the system is judicial deferment. The verse concludes by stating that God will judge between them on the day of resurrection concerning that over which they used to differ.
Wait, why deferment? Why doesn't the algorithm output an immediate correction? Why not send a lightning bolt or a clear sign to say Group A is right, Group B is wrong?
Because that would violate the fundamental laws of human free will and the nature of the worldly test, which the text establishes elsewhere. If the divine intervened immediately in every human argument, faith would not require conviction, it would just be reacting to immediate punishment.
Oh, I see.
The algorithm dictates that when human ego hijacks the text for tribal supremacy, the conflict becomes unsolvable on a human level. They are locked in a closed loop of denial. Therefore, the only logical mechanism of resolution is to defer the ultimate judgment to an external, absolute authority outside the timeline of the conflict. The mechanism resolves not in forced human reconciliation, but in divine deferment. It's a highly predictable, mathematically sound pattern of human conflict resolution.
It's so relatable. You see this everywhere, not just in ancient religious disputes. Think about modern politics. You have two political factions, both reading the exact same constitution, both looking at the exact same economic data, and both claiming the other side is completely illegitimate and trying to destroy the country. It's the exact same algorithm running today. The input is the same, the tribal process is the same, and the result is gridlock. Catholic.
Precisely. The mechanism is fixed, the hardware changes, we argue on the internet instead of in the desert, but the underlying code is identical.
To bring this all together, the research touches on one final, massive application of this word. It looks at the story of Joseph. And honestly, this part was staggering to read. The word Catholic appears 8 distinct times in the chapter detailing the story of Joseph.
Yeah.
And the researcher points out that these aren't just random scene transitions to keep the story flowing.
No, they map out a complete sequential algorithm for the life of a prophet, and really for any human striving for righteousness.
It ceases to be a mere biographical narrative.
It becomes a predictable, step-by-step roadmap of divine justice, human resilience, and the mechanics of empowerment.
Let's walk through this algorithm because it's essentially a flowchart for navigating trauma and success. It maps out like this. Input: a severe trial or betrayal. For Joseph, it's being thrown into the well by his brothers. The immediate process required by the human is maintaining absolute patience and striving for excellence regardless of the horrific circumstances.
And that human process triggers the first divine output.
Right. Output 1, reward with wisdom.
Yeah.
But the algorithm doesn't stop there. It continues to execute. That newly acquired wisdom leads to the next stage, empowerment. He is elevated from a prisoner to a high-ranking official in Egypt.
But empowerment introduces new variables, new dangers, so the algorithm accounts for this.
Exactly. That empowerment triggers the need for divine protection from further corruption or temptation, like the incident with the minister's wife. And finally, after the entire code block has run its course, the ultimate end state of the algorithm is ultimate justice. The brothers return, the truth is revealed, and balance is restored.
What this demonstrates is that God's actions in the lives of individuals, even in the absolute depths of chaotic betrayal, false imprisonment, and suffering, aren't random. They aren't reactive. They follow a highly structured, predictable mechanism of justice, testing, and reward. The 8 instances of Catholic function like mile markers on a predetermined algorithmic path. It tells the reader, if you find yourself in the trial input phase and you execute the patience process, the system is guaranteed to output wisdom and eventually justice because the code cannot fail.
What an incredibly profound journey we've been on today. We started with an advanced AI making a deeply relatable, almost insecure human error, trying to cover up a mistake with busywork instead of confronting the raw data. We learned about the grueling necessity of smashing bottles, the absolute requirement to try and read a text without injecting our own inherited biases, to let the text define its own reality.
It's not easy, but it's necessary.
And through that, we discovered that a single, seemingly boring, everyday conjunction word likewise is actually a master key. It's not a hinge. It's an elaborate algorithmic system of inputs, processes, and outputs that governs everything from how the infinite divine reveals cosmic truths to how petty humans argue about religion, right down to how a single man survives betrayal to become a king.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it challenges us fundamentally. It challenges us to look at all the foundational texts of our lives, whether they are religious scriptures, historical constitutions, legal documents, or even our own personal journals, and stop seeing them as just random collections of sentences or isolated rules. There are profound underlying systems, operating mechanisms, waiting to be discovered if we just pay attention to the seemingly unimportant words. The architecture is there if we have the discipline and the methodology to actually see it.
It really makes you rethink how you read everything. You can't just skim anymore. So I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over this week as you go about your life. We've seen how a single conjunction word in an ancient text can act as a complex hyperlink, revealing hidden divine algorithms. So what hidden mechanisms of action exist in the words you use every single day?
That's a great question.
Think about the stories you tell yourself about your own life, your own struggles. When you use transition words like always or because or therefore I always fail at this, or I am angry because of them, or therefore I shouldn't try. Are you really just casually connecting sentences? Or are you blindly executing a mental algorithm that dictates your reality? Are your becauses actually keeping you trapped in a closed loop of your own making?
We code our own lives with our words.
We do. Take a hard look at your own source code this week. Unpack your own internal algorithms. Look at the words you gloss over. See what bottles you need to smash in your own mind. Remember that broken X-ray machine we started with? Maybe the muddy waters aren't in the image itself, but in the dirty, distorted lens we're using to look at it.
The clarity is always there, waiting, if we are willing to strip away the ego and look at the raw data.
See you next time on The Deep Dive.